March 14th, 2018 to order at 6:34 p.m. We determined that we have a quorum and that the agenda was properly posted. It was properly posted, however, there was a typo with the month of the meeting, and it is March 14th, 2018. At this time, I will call for a chairman pro tem.
I make a motion that Jennifer be our pro tem this evening.
I'll second that.
All right. Any others? Otherwise, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carried.
Okay, we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 4, public appearances. The public's opportunity to speak about any subject that is not a specific agenda item. Do we have any of those?
No, this one's for an agenda item.
Okay. Item 5, discuss and consider the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting of February 14th, 2018.
I would move approval.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Motion and a second to approve the February 14th, 2018 minutes. Is there any discussion? Upon hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Motion carries. At this time, I'll open the public hearing to gather input from the public regarding an application for a preliminary plat, rezoning and potential conditional use permit for the proposed 37.9 acre Park Ridge subdivision to be located west of Vilas Road across from Bakken Park. We'll open that at 6:36.
We have Ryan Arcan from Snyder and Associates is the engineer on the project. And if you'd like to take a seat up there and just kind of walk us through it.
And Jennifer, when we, if public wants to comment, we'll have them go to the pedestal, and we can, yeah, and the consultant can, or the applicants can stay at the table.
This is the preliminary plat of Parkside Ridge off Vilas Road. The proposed development would be a 15-lot single-family home with these larger, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots. Will be zoned as rural holding, and then S4 for the front. A few lots here which would have access out Vilas Road. This hatched area, this is all wetland over here, and then this existing, all the existing trees here would be planned to be staying, so it will mostly be built along the front here. And then there's one public outlet for stormwater management. There will be a short cul-de-sac, 270 feet long here, and these lots will be accessed by utilizing the existing driveway, the existing home here, which is also going to stay. And then there'll be a shared use driveway. That we're proposing to be 24 feet wide. The pavement and base section can essentially follow like a town road type, so we're looking at probably like 3.5 feet or 3.5 inches of pavement. Enough room for emergency vehicles to get around. So we'd be looking at 24 feet wide. These would be served by sanitary sewer up off Vilas Road here. These lots will be served by an extension of the existing sanitary sewer and water off Vilas Road.
Are we asking for questions now, or do you want more to present?
Well, maybe Mike and I can go through our staff reports that I can answer some questions ahead of time and then we can take public comments. So there's 3 actual items you would be voting on tonight. The first is the preliminary plat. The second would be the rezoning, and the third would be the conditional use permit related to the rural holding parcels. As far as the preliminary plat, there's a list of 19 conditions I had in my staff report. Many of those pertain to the covenants. The first one, I think some of the lots were mislabeled on there. Lots 2 and 3 of one of the CSMs adjacent should be Town of Cottage Grove, not Village. The roadway of the cul-de-sac, it's going to need a name. It'll have to be put on the plat. Developer shall pay a fee in lieu of parkland dedication for all of the units. This went to our Park and Rec committee. They felt that there being a very limited number of lots and being directly across from Bakken Park, they did not want parkland within this subdivision. Developer shall pay the park improvement fee per dwelling unit. The applicant will be responsible for reimbursing the village for all MMSD fees related to extension of the sewer service. Within the covenants, as they're written, they apply only to lots 1 and 2, and then 8 through 15. They should really apply to all of the parcels. And the development team has already started working on addressing some of these in the covenants, but this is based on what's in the packet. Number 7, the covenants refer to the lots as lots 1, lot 2, etc. The plat refers to them as P1, P2. The covenants naming convention should match the plat. There's 2 references to the town of Middleton in the plat, which I think is just leftover text from the previous version. Should be changed to Village of Cottage Grove. Section 45 states that side entry garages are encouraged on corner lots. Because we don't want people backing out onto Vilas Road, I think we want to recommend that all lots should be encouraged to have the side-loaded garages. Edit section 4.6D to note that areas within the environmental corridor shall not be seeded, soldered, and mowed. They're not intended to be lawns. 4.7 require all driveways to have a turnaround area so vehicles are not, again, backing into the street. Section 4.8 in the covenants prohibits most signage other than for sale signs for the lots. I think that seems overly restrictive and possibly treading on freedom of expression rights. I would just take that out. Section 420 says the neighborhood committee would have to check off on tree removal in the environmental corridors. We would want to add that the village staff also signs off. Similar in section 8.1. Condition 15, exhibit D of the covenants should also be changed to ensure they apply to all the lots. Section B7 states that a predominance of stone and brick should be used on the front of the homes. That's a little bit vague. Is that half? Is that 3/4? That may want to be defined a little bit better than that. And we would want to see a shared driveway agreement that's recorded for all of lots P4 through P7. All lots that contain conservation areas as shown on the plat shall have a recorded deed restriction prohibiting regrading or tree removal in the area without village approval. And then another item that came up at the Park and Rec committee, they would like to see an access easement that would provide access from the future property that this owner owns to the south up to the bike trail so they can get to Bakken Park without going up Vilas Road. those would be the conditions I have for the plat. The rezoning, I think, just need to get your opinion on this a little bit. So they're looking for the rural holding zoning on lots P3 through P7. The intent of that is that the rural holding designation would allow them to apply for a conditional use permit to have a horse on the property. So if you look at this and decide we don't want horses on these properties, then they should just be zoned SR4 and we don't need the conditional use permit. When you eliminate the conservation areas and look at the amount of open space that's required for a horse per our ordinance, I think some of these lots might be a little tight anyway. I think P3 would work. I'm a little more skeptical about the others. So another option might be to keep only P3 as the rural holding zoning, potentially allow a horse on that. But regardless of that issue, we should add a condition for the zoning that the rezoning will take effect upon recording of the final plat. It's not immediate. As far as the conditional use permit, even though this is driven by the horse issue, we're not giving a conditional use permit allowing a horse tonight. This is conditional use permit is strictly for the size of the parcel. Rural holding zoning allows a 35-acre parcel by right, and then it's a conditional use for anything between 1 and 35 acres. I think we want to say that husbandry or keeping an animal would be the only one of the listed conditional use permits that would be permitted under this permit. They still have to meet all the area and setback requirements within our zoning in order to make the enclosure work. So it said no other uses listed in that section would be permitted. And again, the conditional use permit would take effect on recording the final plat. And then there's really nothing in the covenants about horses at this point, so I think maybe another addendum to that that really addresses how this would work if we're deciding they should be allowed. And then Mike has his engineering staff report.
Okay. I had just some notes. I may not have heard the details in the presentation, and it's just the development adds curb and gutter and parking lanes to the western side of Vilas Road along its frontage. I guess I put down a note that the village should consider in the capital planning in the future similar on the eastern side of the road, but not necessarily including on-street parking. They are including that in the development plan in the cross-section for Vilas Road and constructing the road from the center line towards the development. Preliminary plat. There are planned shared driveways, and so as I think Aaron noted that there should be an agreement in place for those. And then the areas where it crosses through the 75-foot environmental corridor setbacks, as long as those driveways are controlled to drain to the stormwater management system and not directly to the wetlands. We believe that's permittable. The common driveway and coming from comments that were obtained at Public Works Committee were that it should be 24-foot width and minimum, no parking areas in the driveways, and then the fire chief would also comment on required turnaround locations as they see for emergency services to those homes. Cul-de-sac per the plat would have a road name. Currently didn't. We recommend vision triangles for lots 2 and 8 as for the approach onto Vilas Road. Utility easements should be shown. There's a sanitary sewer easement. Another comment from Utility Commission was to move the sanitary easement from the back side of the homes, which would be on the western side of the homes, to what would be the driveway side, to the front side, eastern side of the homes, so that the structures that would need maintenance and that, even if privately held, would be something that's easily done. So it needs to be near that shared driveway. There would also be easements for electric and private utilities that would need to be shown along that, both the driveway and the frontage on Vilas. They have added building lines. That was a comment to be shown for the proposed location of the buildings. And then we want to see the approximate depth to groundwater, and that kind of, we'll have more comments on that in stormwater. I think there was a labeling issue with a lot that's up on the hill. Indicated it was in the village, and it should be noted it was in the town of Cottage Grove. And we noticed some references to that distant township in the covenants and restrictions as well. And then to provide in the covenants the required shared driveway requirements as well for maintenance, repair, and snow removal. And that there would be the driveways that would be coming down onto Vilas Road from their Vilas Road frontage lots, that they would require turnarounds within those driveways so that people would not be backing onto Vilas Road. The utility plan, there's a comment from Utility Commission, and I believe it's on their current engineering plans, and was presented that the 12-inch water main and 15-inch sanitary sewer will be extended from the north side of the Bakken Park driveway entrance. It will cross Vilas Road, and they will be pulling that utility south along the frontage of the lots, and in any future phase they would pull that on the west side of Vilas Road. Plan sheets provide information on the private utility crossings and street lighting locations. Understand you have to coordinate with Alliant Energy on that as well, so that we see where the lighting would be for the neighborhood. New street lighting will be LED luminaires provided by Alliant. There will be also along Vilas Road a 10-foot wide bike path on the western side as part of the frontage for the lots. Parking, again, is provided in that location. Curb and gutter and storm sewers being constructed along the west side of Vilas Road. And then there's an existing culvert under Vilas Road that takes discharge from the farm and some runoff from ponds in the Bakken Park, and that culvert will be lowered by 1 foot. And then we have further comments and stormwater on that, but basically that we want to make sure there's a daylight, positive slope from that culvert to the tributary of the creek. Traffic management, we reviewed the volume that was provided by the developer's engineer and have no further comments. I had it on the front of my comments that the traffic memo was one of the things we reviewed. It was indicating the 1,200 cars per day, vehicles per day on this section of Vilas Road would grow to 1,340 per day. About 140 cars per day is figured. Generally, we figure about 10 cars per day or 10 vehicles per day, per trip per day, per single family home. And that's not necessarily the residents, but all the different services that are involved in providing services to a residence, like mail, garbage pickup, busing, things like that. On that, we also looked at information provided by the topographic survey that was conducted on Vilas Road. We received some data from the developer's engineer on the horizontal curve in Vilas Road that indicates a maximum design speed of 35, which should be posted at a maximum speed of 30 miles per hour. We also looked at the topographic survey as it would create in the crest of the road, so looking at the vertical component of the existing Vilas Road, we conclude that it also had a maximum design speed of 35 and therefore a maximum posted speed of 30 miles per hour by geometrics. Those geometrics don't account for driveways. So the item 4 in traffic management, it does account for driveways, and by 346.57 of the statutes and definitions, there's currently an outlying district there, as it would be called, and with the plat, lots 1, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 form a 1,000-foot stretch of road that would become a semi-urban district. I didn't include lot 2 and 8 because those lots by plat will be restricted from access onto Vilas Road and will use the cul-de-sac. But with the 6 lots that we did include for that 1,000-foot stretch, that puts the separation of the driveways less than 200 feet apart, which forms the semi-urban district. And the district under 347.57 4E sets a fixed speed limit to 25 miles per hour. 346.57 4G also sets town semi-urban districts to 35 miles an hour, but I kind of noted that, that is a basis for an area outside the village. If you were to look at homes of a similar nature being put in outside the village boundaries, the fact that there's a piece of town on the other side of the road would still make it subject to that district that would be the semi-urban district in the town, in the village. So that would be 25 miles per hour. So we recommend that the speed limit in this area be 25 miles per hour, which would extend the current speed zone that the village has, starting at Clark Street going north, to be extended to the south limits of this development. And then it would have to have the appropriate speed reduction signs, warning limits south of that. Stormwater management comments. In general, the calculations, they meet the proposed stormwater management requirements of the village ordinance, and we have several modeling requirements and specifications that need to be clarified, and those included the landlocked basin, which I believe was originally dug as a feature in the original land some years ago. And so just a little bit more detail on the calculations on that, and that it's suggested that a 100-year, 24-hour rainfall be simulated on that pond and get carried through the system. Stormwater collection system designs also would be going from the 10-year to 100-year proposed capacity. So that's on number 2. So the watershed boundary will need to be revised on the final calculations and modeling updated to determine the peak flows of the storm sewer in that area with the graded depression, continuing from the cul-de-sac. We understand that there's an area of wetland beyond the cul-de-sac and where they're showing a stormwater facility on here. And if you need to get a scrape permit from the DNR to provide that capacity and daylighting, we recommend it. Infiltration rates, we'll just need supporting evidence on the half inches per hour infiltration rate that's modeled in the current system. Proposed biofilter shown should have an infiltration depth of 2 feet, or it's proposed to have that, and that exceeds the recommended depth of 12 inches, so it needs to be adjusted for that. Total phosphorus, village ordinance requires a 54% reduction in total phosphorus loads for all new and redevelopment projects, and so we need to get the quantities on that yet. stable stormwater outfalls. There's the 2 new stormwater ponds, basically a wet pond and infiltration pond that we're considering both being part of the system. Stormwater ordinance requires discharges from new construction sites to have a stable outlet carrying the design flows, and we're saying that's the 100-year non-erosive velocity. That means that we don't have erosion. And then I had kind of bulleted in on 5, a comment again on that culvert under Vilas Road and requiring a scrape if necessary to provide positive flow on that. Wetlands, we're just recommending that the DNR concur on impacts to the wetlands. Easements and long-term maintenance agreements. We require a long-term maintenance agreement on the stormwater management features. Again, the 2 ponds, the biofilters, and the stormwater collection system. And it's noted that the collection system is located an existing and proposed right-of-way, and the 2 proposed ponds are located in a proposed outlet. It may be necessary to identify the location of the vegetative strips, and these locations will be placed within an easement. So basically things that are off right-of-way, off property, crossing private property, we want to make sure all the way to the tributary we have easements so that it's identified if someone buys a lot and it has stormwater running across it, even though it's a wetland, we'd like them to know that when they're getting it, it's also a stormwater corridor. That's it. That's my comments.
Aaron, I have a question. This is kind of a fundamental question or issue that I have with this plat. In an RH district, do we still need to have the same width for street, where the lot abuts the street? If this was just an R4, you would have to have 50 feet, isn't that correct? Is that the same for an RH?
I believe so.
Then when I look at this plat, I can't tell exactly how wide those are, those drives coming back, but those drives, I would think would have to be the front, because it has to abut the street. And are those 50 feet in width?
Yeah.
Each one of those is 50?
Yes.
Each one of those is 50 feet? This doesn't look like that when I look at that.
I believe that's what it was, the preliminary plat shows is 50 feet of frontage along the cul-de-sac right away.
So how wide is the cul-de-sac itself? It's 65 across, right?
No.
How wide is the street coming down to the
The
cul-de-sac?
street is, well, it's a 66-foot right of way. Yeah, coming down to the bulb. So the bulb is probably closer to, I don't know what it would be across.
I'll tell you what I did on mine. You can see it there. I tried to figure out what you were doing here. I color coded them, and when I color code them out, it doesn't look to me like those look like they're like maybe 24 feet wide, which we were talking about before. They're not 50s.
I'll make sure we verify it. We understand they're supposed to be 50 though, yes.
So you have 2 50s right here by each other, so that would be 100 feet across, right there. That means that this coming down here would have to be at least 100 feet coming into your, I don't know, I don't get it, I don't see how that can be possible. But this is a fundamental issue, because if you, to me, because if you don't meet the requirement, you would need to change this bulb here somehow to expand these, or you have to expand these somehow to get them up to 50 feet each to get in. And I don't see how you do it, because like the one that's going down here to P8, you're saying that's 50 feet, and you're saying the one right next to it in P5 is 50 feet. It's 100 feet in width.
Yeah, I mean, the dimensions are shown around the preliminary plat here.
I can't read it, that's so small.
As a reference, the cul-de-sac bulb's about 120 feet across, right? Is that?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably about right.
So if that's true, you're saying those three right there coming off, the P4, P6, and P5 alone would be 150 feet off of that.
Across,
120.
it's measured along the circumference. I don't know what else to say besides, we understand it's supposed to be 50 feet. That's the way it's supposed to be platted at. I can definitely verify that. But my understanding is that it is 50 feet, yes.
That's in 50. Can't read it either.
Did you have any other questions, Nick?
Well, I have quite a few of them, but I thought, I don't know whenever we're ready to move to that point, we're going to have the public.
And Mick, you're talking about 50 feet, those sections around the cul-de-sac?
Well, maybe they are 50, I mean.
I can see 50,
They
but I
do
have really
say
good
50s?
eyes.
Show up.
Okay,
Well, that's what they were planning for all along.
okay.
For now.
The 50's right there. All right.
Sure, that's it.
Well, that answers my question.
Please.
Yes.
Chris Hampton, do you want to join the party?
Chris Hampton, 3310 County End, Town of Cottage Grove. Concerns are you have a limited number of north-south roadways in the village, in the township. Vilas is one of them. The number of driveways coming out onto that, where you have a curve and a little bit of a hill, 25 miles an hour or not, is hazardous. And do you want that many driveways coming out on a main north-south road? If something happens on N, what access are they going to use? On your hillside, I would like to see you mandating that you have 100% stay on for water, runoff, infiltration. And then the question on your shared driveway, the maintenance of it. Who's going to require the maintenance, that it be done so that emergency services can get up there, that it's not icy, snow covered, or that it's broken up in the springtime like now and is now mud? Who's going to maintain that road? Understand the landowners are going to do it, but at what point are they going to be forced in maintaining that road to the village road standards? Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm going to close the public hearing then. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing at 7:08.
Just a point of order, can we close the public hearing, does that, we could still ask questions of the applicant, is that?
Yes. It's just that then the questions that are coming from the board.
So we'll move to item 7, discuss and consider approval of a preliminary plat application for the proposed Parkside Ridge subdivision.
I guess my only comment, I guess, is I don't have an issue with the rural housing, the RH designation that we were talking about. That was pretty much my comment.
Go ahead.
What concerns me, I think, long-term with this is Vilas Road and the increased traffic that Vilas will see over the next decade. You know, we've had other folks here that do live on Vilas Road, but farther up Vilas Road, who have come before us and said that they're concerned even going to their mailbox to get mail and things like that. And, we are increasing it by 12% by the load from this subdivision. But when you look at this long-term, it appears to me we're treating it like it's a local street. And we're putting 8 drives off of it. And I guess I see that, I don't really see that being the case in 10 years out here. I mean, if we thought it was just going to stay at that, why would we be wanting 100 feet of right-of-way? Why wouldn't we just stay with what you would, with something less than that? I think there's a good chance that this gets up into the range of, at least double what we currently see there, over the next 10 years, which would put it up into an area that's starting to be up to where we have it, what we're having right now on Main at least, I would guess, because you're up, over 3,000, vehicles a day. And so that's a concern I have. And then you put 8 driveways off of here. You have instead of having one point of contact where people are moving in and out, you now have 8 of them, which would make you think that there will be more accidents because of that, just because of the number of points of access that you have coming onto us to what could be a very busy road eventually. And I find that to be troubling. If this was on BB, we wouldn't allow it. I mean, I just know we wouldn't. We wouldn't allow to have driveways going right on the BB. And there's a chance eventually this road would be up to at least a kind of a minor arterial level, I think, of traffic. And I guess that's something I would ask our staff. What do we expect to see out here over the next 10 years? Because my concern is this, to me, looks like a subdivision, the way it's laid out from a transportation traffic standpoint, that could become a real issue in the future for folks.
What do you mean when you say issue, a real issue?
I think it's going to be a real issue. If you go from 1,400 to doubling that with the amount of traffic on Vilas Road, you're way beyond what you would think you would have on a local street. You're up into at least I think a collector street that you're starting to think you want some limited type of access to, because you're really trying to move people from point to point. And I think Vilas Road now really is used for that. It's used to move people from point to point. You don't have that many access points along this stretch at this point in time, and we're going to add 8 more, which to me is kind of troubling. It seems like the layout should be coming off with a single point, well, actually having 2 points. You'd have multiple access points off of here in case of emergency, and coming into the back portion of this instead of the way it's being laid out.
Well, I guess a couple of the problems or issues we would have is the wetland. There's wetland here, and I think this pond is also labeled as a wetland with 75-foot setbacks. And then the village has maximum cul-de-sac length of 500 feet. So there wasn't really the opportunity to loop the road all the way through. And then we're trying to maintain as much of the existing trees as possible. As far as the future traffic on Vilas Road, I think MSA would probably be better able to speak to that on that. I don't really know much about the comprehensive plan for the village.
Do you have any thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, so to compare it to a block north from BB&N to a block north and then South Main all the rest of the way. It'd be kind of setting that scenario up here. And we know that the traffic counts on Main Street just south of the intersection here are a little over 8,000 vehicles a day. I don't believe anywhere it's less than 7 in the village. And it grows higher as you get up to the interstate. The characterization of Main Street, you know, as you get past that block and a half north, doesn't have driveways. And that's an area where the village's course was to increase the speed limit, because we do get into that more rural nature of the road. And it's 35 up there. As far as growth here, we knew there was a limited growth area on this west side. You know, there's these environmental corridors that continue quite a ways north and south. There could be development to the north. There's some pockets of land up there. But as far as going south and going east, there really was a pretty limited area. As you continue on from 1200 ADT to 1300 ADT and perhaps 1500, 1450, 1500 if they do the south phase. That traffic also, you know, you're looking at, it's vehicles on the road, again, probably 2/3 of which are public services from the village itself. And then there's the commuters, and then you're kind of splitting those north to BB or some commuters south to 12 and 18. And, you know, at any given point, it's going to be a less of an increase than that, just that bulk number. So if it was 1200 ADT down south of this development, it's not necessarily all those vehicles that we're talking about going to 1344, probably 60%, because they're going to be village services, mail services, public works, street plowing, garbage pickup, things like that. They're going to be going either into the village or, you know, different routes into the village. So Viola South isn't going to see that kind of increase, but it's going to see some increase from those commuters that are heading to 12 and 18. You know, and then as far as going from, should we reserve more because there's more right-of-way now and build a bigger road? You know, as far as continuity of traffic and everything, to have, you know, a really big wide road, there is going to be a parking lane in that they're building that we can look at someday being that second lane at some point. When you do that, you take away on-street parking. But I don't see that getting to that point. BB, you're looking at a road that can handle 20,000, 25,000 ADT in a 4-lane characteristic on the west side of the village like that. I don't foresee that here. You get over 10 to 13,000 ADT, that's when you start saying, can the 2-lane road still handle it? And I just, you know, I don't see that programming into this area.
I think, Mike, my question more is though, when you have people, when you have driveways coming off, especially that close together, at what point would we not feel comfortable with that? I mean, that's kind of how we look at local streets, I think, and collectors and arterials. I mean, when you get to the point where you start trying to not have curb cuts because you don't want to have more vehicles, more points of contact as you go along. Is that, you see that as being an issue here as we look to build out over the next 10 years, let's say?
Well, I looked at the frontage on those lots at 125 feet or more, and then the stipulation of, you know, providing turnaround. We can't guarantee that people aren't going to try to back down or back in, but we've got to have, they got to provide a facility in the building plan for the home that they're side loaded or there's a turnaround that they can drive out the front way, you know, onto the street. Given those parameters, you know, and 125 feet apart, that's greater than anything we've seen in the village. You know, comparing it to Main Street is almost like comparing it to 2 lots with 1 driveway on South Main. So the biggest concern to us was speed, and with the geometrics the way they are, really only supporting 30 miles per hour, and then adding the driveways in and, you know, finding, yes, this area should be slowed down. That is exactly why that code and statute was written, because of that kind of density. And so that if they were 200 feet apart or more, then you'd be going up in speed. So I feel comfortable with that, and with 2,000 vehicles, say, on this road as it would be designed for, as they're doing in their plan.
I was just wondering how we can vote on this if two of the lots are in the town.
None of the parcels in the plat.
Oh,
There were a couple that were mislabeled outside the plat.
oh, okay.
Parcels with
But so everything is, okay. Nothing else?
A comment, a lot of these items that are we're talking about that are in the covenants, these covenants can be amended by the developer at any time. So we could approve them on Monday and they could be completely terminated on Tuesday. So I would suggest that we put a provision in there that they cannot, once we get to the final set, those covenants cannot be amended or terminated without the village's consent. I tell you what really troubles me about, one of the things that troubles me about this project is there's just so much that is not, there are so many comments we have on this plat. To me, it's like it's like you're trying to boil an egg and you only boiled half of it, and then you decided, to stop boiling it. And that's kind of the way I see this. I mean, this is going to be a lot of work to bring this thing back in a final form. I think we should see something that's closer to a final form. Not that this can't be done, but there's a lot that has to be done. These covenants are going to have to be totally redone, I think, by the time we get done with this. You're going to need to bring all these lots in. That's going to really change these covenants significantly. So we don't really have the set in front of us that we're going to see, the final set. Which, if we move this forward, I think it's going to be problematic for you on Monday with the board, but that's for the board to decide. But so that's that really troubles me about it. An example of that, I mean, these driveways that you have in there, all that's going to need to be addressed. A lot of these comments I see in here too, I think really should end up in the plat. They should really be on the plat, because otherwise, I just have some real concerns about enforcement on them. Also, we haven't gotten to it yet, but I think we should start thinking about this idea with horses. It sounds pretty cool, but I grew up on a farm and I know a little bit about manure, and did a little research on that, trying to figure out really what we might be looking at. Looks like a horse produces about 10 tons of manure a year. Looks like when you start looking at the phosphorus that's collected out of that, you end up with about 60 pounds of phosphorus a year off a horse, which then you take that times what Dane County is saying that you end up with algae for every pound. They're saying you get 500 pounds of algae for every pound of phosphorus that gets into the water. So you end up with about 30,000 pounds of algae per horse. So for 5 horses, you end up with 150,000 pounds of algae a year, which when you go back to Dane County years ago said we couldn't put phosphorus on our yards. So I just don't see the horse thing probably going very far for you. And maybe something you want to consider. Maybe it will. I don't know. Maybe the rest of the board thinks it's okay. But I think that's going to, when you're trying to put horses in an environmentally well into a wetlands where you have an environmental corridor, I think that becomes pretty difficult to handle. And if you are, then your covenants are really gonna have to be beefed up somehow to have some enforcement, how you're gonna handle all that manure that's coming off of these horses.
Yeah, well, then you would just change the zoning on those larger lots to the SR4, is it?
Yeah, then horses just.
Then horses aren't allowed, so that's all we do.
Well, that's what I'm saying, you're at,
Right, so that's
bringing it
what
up
we
so
do.
you're aware
Yeah,
of it.
that's what we do then.
Is there, what's the thinking behind the horse?
Well, it really isn't about a horse, it was just that we thought that they had to remain in rural holdings in order for it to be a larger lot. But now I'm just
Oh,
hearing that it can be a larger lot, but you just want to put it over to the zoning SR4 so it's limited and you can't have horses, which is just fine.
okay, so
I'm
this
not-
isn't
I'm
like
not a
an
big horse
attempted,
person anyways.
okay.
As soon as I learned how to put gas in the mini bike, horses were over. So, you know.
At least that should be part of the record.
So you can just figure it that way, that's what we do here. We'll just get rid of that rural holdings, just make those large lots SR4, so no animals.
So we're not really going for the rezoning then?
Still would be, we just make it a condition that they're all gonna be zoned SR4, and then the conditional use permit goes away.
I had another question, just as, maybe a question for you, Mike, that when you have lots that are this far back, how do you handle water? You don't loop them though, right? So you're just running one single line back, even if they're like 400, 500, or 1,000 feet?
Yes. There's a requirement for independent shutoffs for all these, so when they get to the point of laying out the water, we'll set where they have to have hydrants and also work that out with the fire department. But there's, they can't really run small diameter main that far and expect it to be a good water system.
So what I'm hearing is you have to kind of oversize lines coming down and then you run one off.
Yeah.
I guess.
Anything else? We need a motion. Motion? No?
Motion. Let's see, which one are we,
Item 7.
item 7. I guess I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the preliminary plat application for the proposed Parkside Ridge subdivision with the comments from the planning staff report dated March 5th, 2018, as well as the MSA recommendations from March 8th, 2018.
I'll second it. Do we want to address the horse situation right now?
With, I
It
guess.
would be part of
side-
the zoning.
Oh,
That's
I'm
part
sorry.
of the zoning? Okay.
I'd like to make a comment though before we actually vote. I'm going to vote for it, but I don't know that I'm going to support it when it gets to the board. Haven't really bought into what you're trying to do with this plat. But I will vote for it to move it on to the next level so that it can be considered by the board.
Well, maybe between now and then we can clear things up that you need to, you know.
It would help, from my perspective, it would help to have something that's more in a final form.
Right, and we've already worked on the covenants and most of the things have been addressed, but we couldn't get them here tonight.
I understand.
I would just also point out, because we've been through this before, remember when you approve the preliminary plat, you are essentially launching it into potential final approval as long as they meet the items that are in the preliminary plat. So I think that really kind of goes to the point that Mick is making, that he's asking that these things be more certain or more definite, because then you really have an idea of what you're approving.
We better should table it?
Well, it's up to the board. I'm just making the comment that that's really, I think, what he's going at is, let's see the final, things in more final form, and that way you really know what you're voting on. We've been in situations where we've approved preliminary plats and then it gets to the final and people are like, well, you know, where did this come from? So,
Well, or you could just make it contingent on that the things that they're looking at and that they've commented about all need to be addressed before you can, you know, even approve the final plat.
Which is what we're doing,
That's,
basically.
I mean, that's pretty much what you've said.
You said you have a lot of these changes already in the works, Tim, you
Yes.
just haven't, they just weren't ready for tonight's.
Right, and some of it was, you know, like the thing with the horse, you know, I don't know how things go, you know, they kind of go like water and, no, we're not necessarily wanting horses. Our main focus there was the larger lots.
Okay.
And, you know, and then within those larger lots as well, there's a very limited area that you can build on. You know, you can't go build anywhere. You know, we have that environmental corridor. That was part of the importance of having it be the Parkside Ridge, is to, you know, maintain that ridge. And I don't know if it's in your packet, but we did a tree study. We might lose 1 tree out of 50 ideal trees with the way that we're doing things, because we're keeping everybody away from all that. And as far as any of the steep slopes, nobody can go near any of that either, because you're limited on where you can build, period.
I'm comfortable that a lot of the issues are kind of clean up on things. We'll be addressing the zoning here shortly after this, so that won't be an issue. So I don't see it as you guys are going to work diligently to clean up a bunch of these items before the village board sees it. That's correct, Tim?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be real important, especially with the covenants, that, you know, those are addressed, because that way then the board's going to have, they're going to know what questions are asked here, and then they'll have the actual language in front of them.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm depending on to get out of this meeting, is to know, okay, now, you've gotten this far, but here's what you've got to address. Okay, then we'll move forward.
Okay, we ready? So all those in favor of recommending approval of the preliminary plat application for the proposed Parkside Ridge subdivision, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 8, discuss and consider approval of a rezoning application for the proposed Parkside Ridge subdivision to apply SR4 single-family residential, RHR rural holding, and park and open space rezoning to the lots within the subdivision. So now we're going to talk about the horses. I am comfortable just getting rid of, I mean, lovely. My father has many horses out in Wyoming. I just think it's going to be a problem here.
We have quite a few horses in the township just right down the road from it, so, but nonetheless, if that's fine with the applicant to just do it with the SR4.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew that right away that horse, whatever you want to call it, would be an issue if we actually did something like that, because I've dealt with it too, and like Nick was saying, and it's not necessary it's really not a key thing to this.
I've seen some other, like within, I don't know if it's the Cottage Grove Township or whatever, but they're zoned for that, and then a lot of people don't even have the horses. They were meant for horses, and some of them take advantage of that, and some of them, probably more of them don't take advantage of it than do take advantage of it.
I just take it right out of there.
I did have a question, though, of you, Mike, in your report where you talk about the total phosphorus. You're saying village ordinances require a 54% reduction in annual total phosphorus loads for all new and redevelopment projects. I wasn't aware of that. What are we trying to achieve there? By how do you get those reductions?
Through the stormwater pond, the basin, and settling. It's essentially how much contact time it has, and then release. You have biofilters in this development as well. If you want to point out some of the stormwater features for the group, that'd be great.
Yeah, so this outlot would have a wet pond and an infiltration basin, and then we're also utilizing the wetland setbacks where nothing can be built to work as filter strips as well. This would mean, like Mike had mentioned, we plan on picking up everything from the driveway and getting it to the basins. So this would basically be roof water, which is considered clean water anyways.
So the chances of, I guess, new phosphorus introduction in the stormwater is going to be going through their treatment basin and then to their infiltration basin and then out. The standard is likely based on, the overall 80% reduction, or was it, you got 90% reduction of total suspended solids, and so he's looking at what's the actual phosphorus reduction from that.
So I have a question of Aaron, then Aaron, on the zoning, the RH, the horse issue would be totally separate from that anyway, but if we wanted to, I guess we could include that in here to make it absolutely clear there won't be any horses as part of this approval.
Good, I mean, they're not allowed on SR4 anyway.
We were just gonna make it SR4 and not even have the RH.
Oh, that's correct, I'm sorry.
So the two conditions we'd recommend then are lots P3 to P7 should be SR4. And again, the rezoning won't take place until the final plat is actually recorded.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so there's a motion and a second we're going to go with the SR single-family residential across the board, lens. And then what was the other thing that you said, Aaron?
The rezoning doesn't actually take effect until the
Until
final
the
plat.
final, yes. Okay, any discussion? Upon hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Item 9, discuss and consider approval of a conditional use permit application to permit proposed lots P3 through P7 within the Parkside Ridge subdivision to be between 1 and 35 acres in size.
Is that a moot point now?
Yeah, it's no longer necessary.
So we just skip it.
Yep.
Item 10, discuss and consider initial public participation questions to be placed on Polco Internet Survey website for the comprehensive plan update.
Remember last time we approved an outline of public participation process for the comp plan. The first step was putting some more general questions out on the POCO system to get some initial feedback. Some of the issues we could look at through that process would be rate of growth, a variety of unit types, lot sizes, land uses north of I-94, and desired character of Cottage Grove Road. In the staff report, there's some example questions of what we could put up there. Basically, they're all formatted that they're a series of statements that people can either rate how much they agree with it or not, from strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, neutral, somewhat agree, strongly agree. So there's a series related to growth rate in the village, kind of comparing various historical growth rates to kind of give people a sense of what these percentage increases really mean. A series that are related to unit types and lot sizes. A series related to land uses, again, different potential uses in the statement, and do you agree that these would be appropriate uses in that area? Similar format for the character along Cottage Grove Road. Statements about what do you think the function of it should be, what should the character be, and again, how much do you agree with these statements? So I guess generally speaking, are these the right topics? Is there anything else you want to ask? And then 2, do we like this format? And then 3 would be, you know, are these the right statements?
On the growth issue, one thing I'd like to see some sort of discussion about, you know, that goes along with the question is, you know, I don't want people just to see, no, we don't want any more growth, residential growth, but we want business growth. I think there needs to be some kind of dialogue that if we do indeed want business growth, that goes hand in hand with residential growth, that people do want to live by where they work. So we can't say, well, we want to bring in some more businesses, which everyone always says, we want to bring in more businesses, but can't live here. You got to find a house that's for sale, otherwise can't build a new one. Don't want that. So we can't have both ways. So I don't know. I'd like to. I don't know how you'd write it, but somehow there has to be some sort of dialogue. In my opinion, to state that. I mean, that a common theme is we always want more business, but we have to, you know, realizing with more business that we do need. We kind of need to preface that question, I think, to say that, you know, keeping in mind with business growth, we also do need residential growth too. It doesn't have to go hog wild, but I mean, it still has to be.
Needs to be an understanding of that concept.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a challenge I had with a lot of these. How much explanation can you provide without steering the response?
Yeah.
So with the question about the residential growth rate, I guess, what are we trying to ask, basically? What are we trying to get at? Find out if the residents want us to keep building more properties or more homes, or?
Yeah, I guess just trying to establish what a comfort level for that is. So the way the question's formatted, the growth rate between 1990 and 2000 was 250%. The village went from 1,000 to 4,000. Obviously, that's very fast.
But there were some unusual circumstances too, as far as the availability of land, you know, during that time. So I mean, that was, I don't think that was typical. You know,
What if we tried to add some data as far as new housing starts in all the neighboring communities, you know,
Yeah.
like DeForest, Wanakee, Sun Prairie, and then here's what we've added, because a lot of people think we're growing really fast and we're actually going really slow.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think over time, I think we've talked about this before, that if you expand that time to the other communities, it's about the same, just that we experienced a lot of it in a short amount of time.
And let me clarify, growing slow compared to some of our neighboring communities.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
A comment on, I mean, how many lots do we already have that are platted in the village for growth?
Platted and vacant.
I mean, how many plats do we have that could go forward right now? Number of units. How many units do we have currently that could be built with approved plats in the village?
Quarry Ridge is one that kind of stalled out a while ago. There's a new person interested in buying that. I think may have closed on it. I believe there's maybe 30, 40 units left in that one. It's about a third of the overall development. That's all approved. They just need a developer agreement approved with the village. So that's something we'll have to work out and bring back to the board, but then that would be ready to go.
I guess I would say, once you're past the preliminary plat stand, I mean, once you make it through with your preliminary plat, you have like 2 years to get a final. So if we look just at preliminary plats that are approved and final plats that are out there, do you have a sense of how many lots that would be for residential and for multifamily?
Yeah, and really Quarry Ridge is the one. Hamburg's finishing off his plat. He's in the last phase.
There's a final phase of Coyle South and Shady Grove, so.
I mean, right over here, we have a GDP for 190 units, just right behind us. So, you know, I'm thinking there's got to be at least
I thought we were talking about single family.
400 or 500, I don't know, it's going to be a lot of lots that are out there, or units that could be built. The other thing too is just that getting retail in Cottage Grove, traffic counts become very important, as we know, and if we don't grow at all, you know, that can be good or bad, but we probably will not see some of the retail growth that some folks in our community would like to see.
So what do you need from us right now?
See if these
I mean,
questions are right.
Do you want us to give you direction, or do you want us
Yeah, I
to?
think if there's feedback on each of these, if you want them formatted differently or focused differently, that would be good to have, so we can bring them back, or would you want to get these on the website?
Have you been having a lot of good participation with the poll call?
I mean, it's less than a year. I mean, it's actually only 5 or 6 months into it. Most questions, I think we get maybe in the 60, 70 responses. And that's usually 60, 70 village residents.
And,
We can-
Because we allow others can comment and it tracks that, but.
And occasionally you get comments too, I think,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Not every time, though. So on the residential growth, we're gonna get something about business growth in there too.
And then maybe comparing to other communities is another
Oh, yeah.
frame of reference.
Great.
I think the other stuff is good. I know north of 94, we had different visions at different times. We had visions of office, nice, office type stuff, and perhaps with Summit, building, that there may be some interest in that. We also talked about retail, large retail. A little bit of it depends upon what people want to do there or willing to do, but. And like Mick's commented before too, you can hold out for certain stuff if you're after certain things. But
Yeah, the
I guess I'd like to
CDA's,
see what people think.
the CDA's done a lot of work looking at land use types up there as well, so I think this is just kind of confirming whether there's support for that or not.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a good start.
Yeah.
How are we gonna use the information we obtained then?
And that provides the backdrop for, as we develop the chapters and land use plans for individual areas.
It probably depends how strong the response is, both in numbers and then extremes. If it's if votes are close, it all depends how much individual survey responses are going to sway different commissioners or board members, but just additional feedback, and as this gets more established, it'll be more useful too.
And then we can always put out different questions too, based on any comments we
Yeah.
get.
We would keep using that as a tool when we do the different land use plans. We can put those up and ask questions about the plan. We can incorporate the actual graphics. I guess if it's really the growth one that needs a little more work, are we okay with maybe putting 2 of the other ones on? And then talk about the growth one again next time, and then hopefully put that and the remaining one on at that time. So we can at least kind of get started.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So you need a motion from us?
Just general direction.
Just general direction?
What's on there is
It
discuss.
says discuss and consider.
I guess, do you have a preference, which of the 2 to ask first?
I don't. Does everybody else have a preference? Which of the 2 to ask first?
I don't.
And I guess maybe the first 2 in my mind are a little more related, and maybe we use the last 2 first.
That sounds
I
good.
think we can,
That'd be good.
I think we can rely on your expertise on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't want me to vote on this? Wait.
Well, if junior legal counsel would like to hear a vote, so I'm good with that. I don't want to stand in it this way.
Okay, so we need a motion.
I'll make a motion that we direct Aaron to ask the first two questions based on population and the type of housing as the first 2 questions to throw out there.
I second it.
Okay, motion.
Which I think was the other way around. Those are the 2 we want to work on. the growth one.
I thought you were gonna fix it and then you're gonna put it up there.
Yeah. I thought I heard Don say those were the ones we would put on.
The,
My fault.
It'd be the land uses north of 94 and the character on Cottage Grove Road.
I thought it was off.
that, which one did you want first?
The land uses north of 94, the character on Cottage Grove Road would be, I think, the two to start with that we post.
Okay, I'll amend my motion.
Okay with the second? Okay. All right, is there any discussion? Upon hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, item 11, update on Community Development Authority's discussions regarding the creation of new tax increment financing districts.
It's mostly on here just to keep you aware of how the city is progressing with this. This will go to the board on Monday, looking for authorization to start the process for preparing the TID creation applications. So there's 3 maps in here that show proposed boundaries that the CDA like. It's possible they could tweak through the process, but I think these are generally what we're looking at. So on West Cottage Grove Road, an overlay here around the intersection, and then the area north of 94. As we go through the project plan with Ellers and MSA, there may be a role for the plan commission in that as well.
On stuff like the proposed facade improvements and all that, what do we, is there anything we ask back in return on stuff like that, if we're gonna give money to existing businesses to do that?
Yeah, if that ends up in the project plan, and what we're showing here are just things that could potentially be in a
Right.
project plan, will probably get narrowed down, then, yeah, we would have to outline all of that in a lot of detail.
But stuff, you know, like the Metcalf property and all that, I mean, that still boils down to what Mick was saying with numbers, you know what I mean? We can throw TIF money at it, you know, and help build something, but it's still, there still has to be the numbers to sustain whatever type of business is gonna go in there. No matter how much TIF money we throw at it, you know what I mean? You build it, but it still has to be, you still have to have the numbers for the population to sustain those businesses. So I guess I'm a little nervous on throwing money at stuff like that when, you know, the problem is more numbers than it is, I think, getting it built. Kevin, you know, they were willing to build stuff there in the past, it just, people backed out, the numbers didn't work, but the businesses didn't.
I mean, something like that, it's probably going to be a pay-as-you-go model if there's any kind of incentive where they would have to build it first before they get anything back. So if the market's not there, then they won't build it, and there won't be any money expended. I don't know, Mick, you've been part of this as well. I don't know if you have any other.
I mean, in a typical deal, we'll have a developer agreement that'll be entered into between the village and the owner, developer, and that will address how the increment's going to be, how it's going to be applied and allocated. And, kind of a typical deal, if we were putting in some infrastructure or doing something, and we were going to put our money into it as a village, like issuing bonds or whatever, that would be something that would be guaranteed repayment and would come out typically first. One thing that we started talking about at the CDA is really starting to look at having some actual criteria that's more definite than what we have now. An example would be in a lot of jurisdictions, I should say a lot, but at least Madison and some of the other surrounding ones, if you're going to ask and request to receive a TIF from the village, then you would need to be putting in at least as much equity into the project as you are receiving on a present value with your increment that you're going to be getting back. Those sorts of things, just making sure that, just like if you're buying a house or getting a loan, we're kind of in the situation as the village, we want to make sure that it's being underwritten and we have a quality person coming in that will be able to be there, repay, you know, and all that. So anyway, we started just having preliminary discussions about that, and Aaron is now going back and taking a look at some of the different criteria that we might want to put in from some of the surrounding areas, like Wanakee, and no, it wasn't Wanakee, it was Sun Prairie and Madison.
I like that, because, yeah, Madison's been stuck several times in the past. You know, Janesville got stuck on some stuff pretty good. But I like that idea. They have people on the skin in the game.
And the way we do it too, there's very little risk usually, because we do what's known as a pay-as-you-go type TIF. So really the risk there, from our standpoint, that's not that there's not some risk, especially if we're putting in infrastructure, like what happened out here with this intersection.
Mm-hmm.
There can be some risk on that. But really, the developer's taking the lion's share of that risk, because if they don't perform, they're not going to get any return of the TIF, because any proceeds in return. So unlike Madison, which really goes out and issues general obligation bonds, and then turns around and loans the money to the developer, which is, so up front you're getting, as a developer, you're getting that money, and they're taking a second mortgage on your property, which is, I don't think we've ever done anything like that here.
Okay. Anything else on this topic?
All right, item 12, comments from commission members.
No comment. That was a good discussion we had on the TIF stuff, so.
Nick?
No comment.
No comment.
And I have no comment. Future agenda items.
Continuing comp plan discussions. Hopefully we'll have some of these results from the first two questions we can start to look at. Continuing to keep you updated on the progress with the TIF plans. I guess we'll see with these guys here if they get to a final plat for next month.
Are we going to discuss the growth questions as well?
Yes.
All right. Item 14.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion and second to adjourn. Non-debatable. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time.